Terry. I think Mr. Fiorini may have asked your question.
Yeah, so I think there was 5 items covered, so you'll have to bear with me. I'll try to cover them all. First, I wanted to add in, because it relates to this topic, add on to the legislative report by Jessica, which is, you probably saw the front page of the Bee, but the WRDA bill passed the House, actually overwhelmingly. I was kind of shocked, because as you know, it's been stalled for several years because the Republican members were considering them earmarks. And so I think that's a good deal of progress. There obviously is a lot more that has to be done because they still have to reconcile.
Then was then, now is now.
Yeah. And, so we still have to have a reconciliation. And then, of course, after that, then we have to wait for an appropriation. So it's not like the money's coming right away. But still, after 5 years of being stalled, I think that's really important news. That's related. On Dave's presentation, my question, I don't know if he's still here or not, but my one question would be, he was referencing like Task 1 and Task 2 from this interagency agreement, and I just wondered if that's been made available to the public and to the monthly Delta Levy work group. Down. What? Oh, down. Thank you. So, and if not, then it would be great to be able to see that, and because it sounded like you were describing some actual work stuff. And so if you haven't, it'd be nice to go to the maybe monthly meeting and describe to them kind of what's coming and the next steps, because they obviously are there.
This is an agreement between the department and the council. I'm not sure that it's.
Mr. Metz, if you're going to comment, you got to go grab Lynn's mic. Just slide your chair forward, grab Lynn's microphone. Thank you.
The agreement is an interagency agreement between the Department of Water Resources and the Delta Stewardship Council. And I'm not 100% certain that it would be appropriate to open it up to public discussion. I can certainly talk with our Office of Chief Counsel and get a finding. If it is, I don't have any problem with sharing it. But
yeah, it sounds like it's already approved. Usually those are provided. I've seen them even in BDCP.
Yeah, I think
occasionally.
we had posted our agreements with the Bay Conservation Development, the MOAs with
those are usually public
BCDC
documents.
and with Fish and
once it's
Fish and Game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe wait till once it's executed. But that would just be nice, because it sounds like then they'll see the steps that are coming forward, and I think that would be helpful. And then I, too, really want to compliment Bill and his staff. It is kind of amazing, because it's tangible stuff that we're seeing that they're really doing, and I do think it's a lot of progress, actually, in the amount of time that they've had, and you did have a really good memory on a lot of that stuff, Randy. That was good. I think the one thing that I was thinking about as I was sitting there, and I had just a really short little conversation with Anthony there, was that the locations are really, in my opinion, farther south. They're south of North Delta's boundaries anyway. And so you have a huge swath there. And I don't know how much time it takes to get there by water or by Highway 5 or anything. But if you go back to what I was saying about BDCP, and if they're in a 9-year construction and they have problems, you're going to need those. And ironically, he was saying Hood was one of the locations, but they can't use it because it's going to be used for BDCP. But even if it wasn't BDCP, I just wonder, how does the YOLO bypass and all the other, levees that are up in my part of the Delta, are they left with a longer period? So that was just one thing I would add to it. But again, you're to be complimented, because there's just obvious that there's been a lot done, and there's always a lot of little devils in the detail, and how you share and, come and how the districts can come and get it and replenish it and all that. But it's been really nice to see, so thank you. On the, God, I can't even read my own writing. On the inspections, on the report we just had from Len, the thing I would add in, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this at least a year, maybe 2 years ago, is that honestly, you saw 54% right now are inactive, and I had said, I think 100% will be inactive. And part of that reason is the Corps started doing something in California that they've never done before. And when it was back when they got stimulus money, and so now they're continuing to do it, and they're called periodic inspections. And what the Corps did is they took some of these districts and they grouped them into a system that makes sense to them. I've never had them being able to explain to me how they picked those systems. But the problem with that is let's say you have 5 districts in that system, and let's say you have 4 that are in 100% compliance, but you have 1 that's not. Or let's say that they even have, 200 feet that's not. Everyone's out. It all falls to that least common denominator. And that's why I said it's really hard to imagine that we just don't end up with 100% on that aspect alone. But then I'll add in some other issues that I think kind of relate to that. One of them is since the constitutional amendment Proposition 218 was passed, reclamation districts, levee districts now fall under that. And previously, honestly, when they could raise their own assessments and do stuff, they would sometimes help those neighboring, more rural districts with some of these upgrades. But under Proposition 218, you really are limited from doing that because the assessment has to be very specific to those parcels. So I think going forward, that becomes more difficult as more of the districts end up under Prop 218. They aren't all already. SB 753 is going to be obviously a new tool that will be very useful, but it will take time to go after all of those encroachments, number one. As Len pointed out, they've not been given a budget to do that yet, so anything that you can do, if you think that's an important issue, I encourage you to weigh in with the legislature, because after January 1st, when they have the authority, they're just going to need funding, let's face it. But really, if you then think about all the encroachments, we only ever talk about the ones we're really familiar with, which are, a lot of times the swimming pools or the vegetation. But there are a lot, I think there's 60 things on that list. So again, you go back to anything on those lists can throw you out, especially if you're in that periodic system now. So it's hard to imagine how they stay in. And on the vegetation issue, the DWR wrote a really excellent letter several years ago, like 5 years ago on the issue, when the framework agreement was about to expire, about really the cost issue. Because even if you said, let's remove the trees, one is you can't afford it because it's very, very expensive as a district. I don't even think the state can afford it. But then you go back to really the Delta Plan or BDCP. We're trying to create more vegetation, which somebody had asked, how's the conversation going? Can we make any progress? Obviously, that's a goal, and maybe under the SWIFT, they'll look at us differently and let us do something differently. But just so you know, again, I go back to I don't see how we're going to prevent some of these from being out. And on the liability issue, I look at it a little bit differently than you, Mr. Eisenberg. The way I looked at it was, and I could be wrong because I'm not an attorney, and I've only been doing the water stuff for 5 years, so keep that in mind. But right now, for these project levies that we're talking about and being either active or inactive and getting the federal money, is the state, in this case the board, they had a different name then, gave assurances. They took over. So right now, I believe the state has that liability for that 54% that's not in.
Well, let's assume, just for the purpose of discussion, that's true. That suggests strongly to me that we should be vigorous on moving in and abating a nuisance if there's a delay in response. I mean, if that's the case. It's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, again, you will have a capacity issue, number one, of whether it's funding to be able to do that?
No.
Personnel
no,
to do that?
because the bill gets sent to the property owner. And now I know the complaint, well, I can't pay that. I mean, the problem is an abatement is a lien against property. And if one of the consequences is that people cannot afford to maintain levies at a minimal level of protection and at a shared cost, how can...
I don't think it's just an issue of not being able to afford. First of all, if I had to guess, you're probably talking like tens of thousands of these when you talk about all these levies. But it's not just a matter of I can't afford it. First of all, you're going to have some that I don't want to. They think it's their right. I mean, that's part of the problem. And yes, we have a new law, but I just think some of that is really going to take time. So I do want to express that it won't be an overnight thing. I don't think all those encroachments got there overnight, whether they're the trees or the swimming pools and fences. We're not going to get rid of them overnight. So just understand that. And then to really add on, I'll go back to what I had said earlier, which is keep in mind what we just heard and needing to do all these things, and that there is no Prop 1E type of levy funding in these new water bonds that have been approved. So we will hit this wall there too. So I encourage you to really think about that. So thanks.
Supervisor.
One of the problems is that many of these people have permits from the state and or the Corps
Correct.
to have done these things.
Correct.
And so when you come to them and say you need to take that dock out or whatever, they say, I got a permit. I'm not doing it. If they've got a lot of money, I'll tell you what they do is they'll just fight you. And they do. So,
Yeah.
and again, if there's just this one house with a bad swimming pool, it's in one area in Stockton, just on the north side. There are 7 houses along the water. 6 have agreed, or 8 houses, whatever. All but one has agreed to take out their stuff. The one with the pool says, you're going to have to pay me to take this out because I have permits to do this. Everyone in that whole development, there's almost 300 houses, will have to pay flood insurance.
Yep.
Because one guy is the dog in the manger or whatever you want
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of complicating things but I mean, the good news is we do have more tools. We do have WRDA, but I just want to caution you, we don't have any new levy money coming on water bonds, and we won't be able to do this overnight, but we will need funding to do this, and they're going to need staff. They don't even have staff to do that. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay.